with shares of Maybank listed on the KL Stock Exchange. The stock down over 5% since the beginning of the year, but still outperforming the KL Composite, which is down nearly 8% since January. Now, Southeast Asia's fourth largest lender by assets is peaked to continue. Global market volatility is a key risk when it posted lower Q3 profits last month. But it's still seeing steady loan growth across key home markets like Malaysia, Indonesia, and also Singapore.
Well, let's talk more about the bank strategy as we head into the new year with Michael Foong, Group Chief Strategist Officer and CEO International at Maybank. Michael, good to have you with us. You're in charge of international strategy at Maybank. Obviously, the bank posted lower profits in the latest quarter. Where do you see 2019 for the bank? I mean, in Malaysia, for instance, reported weaker growth this year as the country's largest lender. How does 2019 look to you?
Well, we're cautiously optimistic about 2019. I think the GDP for Malaysia is looking to grow just a shade below 5%. And I think we'll get our fair share of the growth in Malaysia. And I think with the announcement of the budget in November, the Malaysian budget, I think the kind of thinking about investments by the business community has more or less stabilized, and we're looking to see more of that happening in the first half of 2019.
Stabilized is an interesting word because obviously there's been a lot of uncertainty in Malaysia, largely politically, and that's caused uncertainty in the business community. It seems very early on to use stabilised because we're still in the throes of change. The government is still trying to find a path, I suppose, through the instability that's been caused over the last few months. There's still some uncertainty ahead, is there not? Is that a fair assessment?
I think there is some, yes, there is some. But if you take a look at the latest figures with respect to export growth and FDI, the numbers have been very encouraging. Very strong growth over the last 2 to 3 months.
Okay, so you do expect that then to continue. You're not expecting further uncertainty on the political front?
Well, we are always hopeful that there will be more and more stability and more growth.
Malaysia has a new government. As Malaysia's largest lender, I mean, are you hoping for more things to come out of the government that will actually help boost the financial sector in Malaysia, where the bulk of your operations, where the bulk of your revenue is still coming from?
Yes, we've heard quite a lot of encouraging news about the way they will encourage SMEs to grow. A lot of commitment to technology through 4.0, Industry 4.0, and we think that that's going to filter through with a lot of the small and medium-sized enterprises.
How much are the startups, largely startups, but not always startups, having an impact on your business, both in Malaysia but also internationally, because they are growing so quickly, these non-bank lenders, other payment systems. Just how, I mean, obviously this is something that you follow very, very closely. How much harder is it for the bigger banks to stay on top of where some of these little, very nimble startups are in the payment space?
Well, we like to think of them as partners. I actually
like them.
Not really competitors. We learn a lot from them. One thing they've taught us, they have taught us how you can dissect a value chain and get really good at performing one part of it. But I think banks continue to have a franchise for delivering to end-to-end financial services for customers. So we learn from them. In certain parts, they are a bit disruptive and competitive, but we welcome that because it gets us to focus on the customer experience.
One of the biggest issues that you would have to deal with within your role is security, is it not, in particular cyber security? It's happening everywhere in the world. Facebook is dealing with issues, Google's dealing with issues. How are you staying on top? Because we're still hearing that boards across the world are still taking very slow steps to get enough IT experts, for example, on the board or elsewhere within their organisations to really remain ahead of these risks?
Not us.
Not you.
Cybersecurity is right up there. In the discussions that we have with the board and with the executive committee, we spend a lot of time deliberating what to do. And in fact, we think that it's not if you're going to get hacked, it's when you're going to get hacked. And it's about how you respond the speed and the efficacy of the response that's going to continue to maintain that level of trust that customers have in us.
Michael, let's talk more about your digital strategy. Clearly, Maybank wants to be the digital bank of choice, whether it's in Malaysia or in the region. You've actually launched your first batch of Alipay terminals in Malaysia. You've introduced this fintech sandbox, providing opportunities for startups and innovators as well. What does this digital strategy entail? Does it ultimately mean less physical branches for you at the end of the day?
I think it could, but I think the jury is still out. The branches are still a very important distribution channel to project the brand, and we believe in humanizing financial services. That's our mission. So banking with a human touch is critical. Having said that, of course, we see the trend of customers demanding more and more digital interaction with the bank, whether it's checking your balance, which is pretty run-of-the-mill, but also buying new products. So we identify products that we can actually deliver to our customers straight through. We call it STP, and you could sign up for a current account, a savings account, credit card, and eventually other loans without having to speak to somebody. So we're responding to that demand, that trend.
What's the contribution like from the digital business to the overall revenue?
We're in the midst of measuring that. There is significant benefits from cost savings with respect to having the cost to serve to customers reduce significantly. And I'll give you an example. If you process the application for a credit card through a straight-through process approach, the cost to process that is about 1/5 if you do it the traditional way. So we think there's a lot of traction that we can get from that.
What about employment and staffing in this digital age? If you're taking out, if it ends up, as Christine just talked about, with fewer branches on the ground, there's a likely chance you're going to have fewer staff members. But what about even just the processes that you're talking about now? If you do it online, you don't need to go into the bank. You don't need to talk to an individual. Does that mean you're seeing your overall staffing levels, your numbers actually start to drop?
Well, our numbers have been dropping gradually through attrition, but we are absolutely committed to our staff. So we've come up with a program called Future Ready, and every staff undergoes that, and they go through a series of e-learnings as well as classroom learnings to prepare them with the kind of skills that they'll need to be relevant in the quote-unquote digital future.
Oh, wow. Okay, impressive. All right. Michael, such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you sitting here on the desk with us.
Thanks
for joining us.
Good to be here.
Well, coming up in the next hour of the show, British Prime Minister Theresa May making a